DJ Leroy.
Night Watchman, my man. Well, do tell me, did you miss me?
Of course.
And did we also miss the entire month of August?
Well, I didn't miss it. I was here. No, that's not true. I was in Georgia for
Georgia. I do remember that. Absolutely.
That's right. And you were out of the country. Okay.
Well, do tell you weren't stumping for that governor in Georgia now, were you? Brian Kemp.
I was stumping for Stacey, of course.
But of course. So I was actually at the home, because this is appropriate, the home of Rafa Nadal.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm impressed. Okay.
So go ahead.
I was not, but I was at the Althea Gibson street naming ceremony, which is to me a much bigger deal.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. You know what? I'm not even going to attempt to steal that thunder. You're a night watchman. You got it.
No disrespect to Rafa, but Althea had a bigger impact on the sport.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and the reason why we're doing this show here is to tie it all together, because, as you know, we're in the midst of the U.S. Open. This looks like Serena's last dance, so to speak. And it's an opportunity for us to recognize the legend that is Serena, the legacy that is Althea Gibson, and also to look for the future. So
absolutely. So we got a couple of guests that can really speak to this, huh?
Right. But before that, let's do just a little presentation of the actual street naming ceremony.
So you want to...
Oh, they do it right now?
Wow. All right, wait, give us a countdown.
A countdown. We waited all this time.
And that's how we do it in Harlem.
Wow. So I did actually miss some serious excitement.
Yeah. Listen, everybody was there. All of our elected officials, a great turnout by the community, a great turnout by the local media. So,
okay.
And beautiful. So who we have to thank for this?
You know what? I guess the public at large, but also the village of Harlem.
Right, but I was talking about in particular the guy who has worked on this for years.
No, not that guy. Not that guy.
That guy. Yes.
You talk about a veteran of Soul Lounge Primetime, the Honorable Glenn Gilliam. Is that him?
And as you can see, he's living on that corner right now.
Never left, Bob. Never left. Protecting it at day and night.
All right. Okay. So, we also have who was at that ceremony, Dr. Keith Taylor.
Hello.
Yeah, and I think we're going to bring Curtis back.
We need to. I mean, really, it's a much better show.
They're trying to erase you, brother.
Dr. Keith, you see what I put up with. You see what happens, right?
I see, and please hang on. We want you here for the entire show.
Everybody's got material. I love it.
He's gone.
Okay. All right. Well, we have to make room for the youth. So I want to introduce Karin Chau and I'm going to actually go to my cheat sheet because she already has, a bio that I can't remember all the things, but I can tell you this. She's a high school senior, also a community volunteer, National Honor Society member, 2-sport scholar athlete, both tennis and volleyball. And she and her mixed doubles partner earned their school a state tennis championship. I believe she is from the state of Maryland. But what she's also known because she is not just an athlete, but she's also an activist. She has raised money for the Whirlwind Johnson Foundation, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. She's a member of the USTA and the American Tennis Association, which is the oldest black tennis association in the country. And so we wanted to have her on because she represents the living part of the legacy of tennis that is ongoing, and the spirit that has existed since before Althea and then continues to date. So welcome everybody to Soul Lounge Primetime.
Yay! Absolutely. So I did see what I missed. I all I could say is, Glenn, yes, you told me it was going to be a sure enough stellar celebration of Althea, and from all appearances, it was. But you know what? The thing that really kind of gets me is that, Corinne, I'm looking at the future of tennis. And so I'm really, really, truly gratified with that. And then, you know what, Dr. Keith, without you there in Central Harlem, making sure that stuff like this happens and that, our legacies are remembered and also honored and put forth. Thank you for the service, man.
I am happy that Harlem showed up because this was a momentous occasion, and not just because it was in the New York Times, because that's a paper I'm going to save for prosperity. But Harlem is huge in many different ways, and Althea Gibson was one of the reasons that we are on the map. So what better way than to, through Glenn's intrepid efforts, to honor her with this permanent legacy that means a lot for the people of Harlem and the tennis community and the rest of the world, because we have lots of folks who come from all over the world to visit Harlem. This street sign is representative of a guide showing the way to genius and to brilliance and the creativity that was born on these Harlem streets.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know what, Glenn, I get on you a lot, man. But you get on me too. So having said that, I like to actually commend you for your straightforwardness in terms of making sure that it got done. Because Lord knows, I remember many late nights you'd call me up and say, "Yo, Curtis, how do we do?" So tell us about this particular journey in terms of your involvement with seeing that this got done, man.
Well, how much time do we have left? Because Keith pulled up a ton of time. I really am grateful so much for Keith because, the Central Harlem folks were instrumental, of course, in putting this proposal forward, taking the vote, and really the formality of approving, what was necessary to move this forward. And it's very serendipitous because this was started literally January of 2019. And I came to a couple of meetings by the local community board to see how it would play out and what I needed to do. And then thankfully, almost a year later, after gathering signatures and support letters, I was able to present to the board. And on March 10th of all days, and literally March 11th, New York went into lockdown. So very fortunate that we got it in when we did, because we probably wouldn't have been able to celebrate at least this year in the way we have. And this is all born out of my advocacy for Althea since 2015, since her documentary came out that Rex Miller created, fabulous award-winning documentary. And I'll just say Althea's story has resonated so much with me because, like so many African Americans, her story is very common in a lot of ways, but the intersectionality of who she was and what she represents is really, as I think Keith said, a guidepost for so much of what African Americans have been able to achieve, coming out of cotton sharecropping in South Carolina, migrating to Harlem to find a better life. And, lo and behold, on the street that she literally grew up on would be her way out, or at least her way up. Putting a police athletic league play street on her block, and paddle tennis was right in front of her door. And so she picked up the paddle, never lost a set there. It was into ping pong, won championships as a preteen, and thankfully Buddy Walker, the musician, and I think he was a block association advocate or supporter in that respect, and saw the talent, and thankfully got her into tennis, over to the Cosmopolitan Club, which was obviously extremely famous, an elite club for players in that day in Harlem. And the rest, as they say, really was history. So really grateful. And you guys, as many times as you've been nice enough to discuss Althea Gibson and what we've tried to do, and what I've been working on, this was definitely a culmination of a lot of things, and I couldn't be more grateful to be sharing this with you guys, because it's just important that Harlem is represented, and you guys represent Harlem, and it's a beautiful day, and I'm just came off. Thanks so much.
Beautiful. Excellent. And Corinne, being that I'm looking at you, and I do know that you are indeed what we would say is the future of tennis. What actually hit you? What kind of said, I want to do this? Do tell.
Oh wow. So I started my Whirlwind reading challenge that in August of 2019, and I found out about Whirlwind Johnson, who was one of the greatest influences, also like Dr. Hubert Eaton, for Althea Gibson, in the same Rex Miller Althea documentary, when I played at the ATA national tournament in 2017, I think. So that really, and then, oh my God, getting a speech at the Althea Gibson ceremony for the unveiling of her street, that was insane, because she was one of my biggest mentors as a child, because if it wasn't for her, then I wouldn't even be holding a racket.
Nice. Okay. All right. So and you know what,
So, can you
Go
talk
ahead.
a little bit more about Whirlwind Johnson? Because I know a lot of people know about Althea, but they don't know about that part of the story. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, and what got you into it, and then tell us a little bit more about the reading challenge.
Okay. So when I watched that Althea documentary in 2017, I learned about Dr. Whirlwind Johnson, who was one of her coaches and inspiration to go on. He had a youth program, and he has a tennis court at his house. And I actually got to play on that tennis court where he trained Althea Gibson and also Arthur Ashe. So that was crazy. Yeah. But he trained youth Black tennis children, because they weren't able to play in the normal tournaments, and then but the ones that they could play, he would have them all get on a bus, and they would go all around the country to all those tournaments. And I really decided to do a Whirlwind reading challenge, because his tennis court and his house, which is right next to it, is getting renovated, and they needed money, and I raised that in some of the money, because they already restored the court, and they're trying to turn his house into a museum for him.
Wow. Nice. Oh man. You know what? Okay. I want to actually make a little statement. I'll have any one of you guys weigh in on this. Okay. So certainly we do know that Serena, this is possibly her swan song. This is the time that's her last major. Certainly we do know that she had been chasing, I guess, Margaret Court's record. But I have to say that is it not true that Margaret Court actually participated and said her stuff before the Open era? So, having said that, I would submit to you that Serena's accomplishments are that much more greater than anyone in the history of tennis. Someone take it.
Well, needless to say, we don't use Margaret Court's name on this channel. So
Right.
outside of the fact that you got most of that right. Anyway, no, I mean, I'll take this as the tennis historian on the panel. Margaret Court played during the amateur days, started her career during amateur, like Althea Gibson. And being from Australia, she had a huge advantage when it came to playing the Australian Open because nobody was traveling there. I mean, for those early years, for those amateur years, it wasn't a huge competitive field. So many historians, and Brad Gilbert, who's been commentating on ESPN for years, has all but disqualified really those first, I mean, she won, I think, 11 Australian championships out of her 24.
Wow. Okay.
So, I think she was playing her cousin at some point.
No, come on.
I guessed in one respect, but there's no comparison, as we've seen, and that's the beauty of living in this age, having a chance to see Serena and Venus, and you really can't say Serena's name without saying Venus. Because without Venus, there'd be no Serena. And King Richard's movie really amplified that. But the beauty of it is that we've got these champions, Tiger Woods, who was sitting in Serena's box the other night when she won. Another unbelievable champion of color in a traditional white sport. And then, of course, for those who are of the Formula One fandom, we have had to bring him in.
I knew you had. I knew you had to.
Yeah, and I only bring him in to say that we're living in the golden age in what are non-traditional African American sports or accessible sports. We've got these all-time GOATs, literally, and Serena is most prominent amongst them because literally she's still playing. I mean, Tiger is still playing as well, and so is and Lewis is still driving. He'll be driving this weekend. But anyway, the long story short is it's so critical, and that was what I tried to say in my little speech, is recognizing these champions in real time is the issue, that we don't get those acknowledgments when they happen. And I'm so tired of seeing these important pioneers only get their flowers, if you may, 50 years later. And I have to comment because I loved Corinne's discussing the Whirlwind Johnson Foundation, because Dr. Johnson, who coached the only other two Black inductees in the International Tennis Hall of Fame, had to wait 40 years after he died.
Wow.
Lance Johnson, who Corinne had the honor of meeting, his grandson, who was most instrumental in getting that court resurfaced and restored, and who was obviously at the lead of the Whirlwind Foundation. Unfortunately, he's passed, rest in peace, but he always took the time to lobby and advocate, as his whole family did, for the better part of 38 years. He didn't get inducted, Dr. Johnson, until 2009. He died in 1971.
Wow. Wow.
And as you guys know, I've been advocating for Richard Williams and Oracene Price to get in because they've been facing really rule changes since their nominations have been put into submission. So it's really critical that we have platforms like this will discuss these things, and that we have some folks who are really ready to ask the hard questions and make sure that we get these honors in real time. So appreciate it.
Nice.
I just wanted to say 3 words. Althea came first, and that was reiterated throughout the ceremony, and rightfully so, because when we look at tennis greats, she created the space with which all of our African American stars, came on afterward, and it's hard for me to imagine having to go into a back door of a facility in order to play, and then having to leave out of the back door because of the forces of discrimination, de facto and de jure, that existed throughout the world at that time. And she did it. The tenacity, the mental fortitude that was required to deal not just with the preparing for and competing against the opponent, but also dealing with the outside world and how it thought you should be treated. For her to become a champion so many times, and also to show proficiency in other areas as well. The first African-American woman on the Lpga tour is something that, unfortunately, if not for people like Glenn, who fought very hard to make sure that the world knew and had a permanent representation in Harlem of where she came from and who she is, we would really be amiss. And future generations, it was nice to see the representation, so many different segments of parts of the world that she influenced. Seeing the Harlem Junior Tennis League there, seeing all of the tennis greats, the African-American tennis legends there, Katrina Adams and so many others. It was an amazing time, and really made me think about how the efforts of one person can affect the whole world. And even though in life she did not get the due that she was supposed to get, as so many of us have, as Glenn has mentioned, it was good to see that recognition today. And for the future generations, we now see them getting their due real time as Serena is on the world stage.
And I also think that sometimes people forget the fact that Althea had to leave tennis because she wasn't making enough money to sustain it. Had it been in the era, had she played in an era like now when tennis players are well compensated, she could have had a career that we would be having more conversations about Althea versus Serena, not Althea versus Margaret Court. Because the fact is she went to golf because she could get paid in golf. And so that's a context that we have to put into place, that yes, she won her championships, but there were a lot more that were left on the table because there just wasn't a framework for her to be able to sustain herself playing tennis.
Well, I got to say, Bob, and thank you, Keith, for that intro as well. There was a framework for her to actually sustain herself, but it just didn't apply to Black people. Unfortunately, Margaret Court, was earning some money. And like I say, the funny part about Margaret Court's record is nobody ever brought it up until Serena got close to 23. We didn't hear about it when Steffi Graf was amassing 22 championships. It was only brought up as some kind of a benchmark because someone of color, namely Serena, was threatening it. And, and really, I think the most important part is Althea was doing this as a single woman in the midst of Jim Crow around the world. As everybody knows, whether you're Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's record or whoever, death threats were commonplace. Obviously, use of the N-word, calling you out your name, treating you, obviously, as a second-class citizen was more of the same. And for Althea, I mean, you're talking about serendipitous. She was going to leave the sport and go into the military. She had an interview. Yeah, she had an interview to go into the military. literally the State Department, in trying to cover their behind, put together a trip for these tennis players to go over to the Far East to show how the United States is welcoming. We're diverse. She was one black amongst 3 other white players. And that was literally to try to deflect from the Emmett Till murder. That happened in 1955. They sent them on this trip going into 1956. And lo and behold, that's where Althea really honed her craft, in the sense of knowing she could earn a few dollars as a stipend and as reimbursement, but she had to stay healthy so she could perform, and she had to win. And that really honed her professional skills. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for that State Department trip, she may have left the sport much earlier. And to your point, Bob, no doubt, Serena would have been chasing Althea's records, because out of 19 finals, she won 11 of them in singles, doubles, and mixed doubles. And just as a point of trivia to a degree, Dr. Johnson played mixed doubles with Althea and won 6 titles at the ATA, which most people don't know. He wasn't just a mentor and a coach; he was a partner of hers. So,
wow.
Yeah, really, I mean, there's just such a breadth of history that most people are not aware of. And it's one of these things that Rex Miller's film is excellent in that respect. It brought to my attention the ATA. I was so immersed in Negro Leagues and the United Golf Association. It predates all of that, starting in 1916. And for Bob, my co-alumnus, Tally Holmes, class of 17 at Dartmouth, was part of that founding group.
Wow.
Put the ATA together. And with any luck, I put in an application for their nomination finally to the International Tennis Hall of Fame, which should have happened generations ago. I mean, they're 106 years old, and they're finally getting nominated for the Hall of Fame. That's ridiculous. But that's what happens when you have these gatekeepers who have to get invitations, as opposed to just seeing the record of accomplishment and saying, these folks deserve to be in. Anyway, appreciate it.
So the other thing we need to talk about is that before Althea, there was the community, because the community raised funds for her to take lessons. The tennis community, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Eaton, which is that untold story that came out in the documentary, is so important, because as we see the throughput from Dr. Johnson, Dr. Eaton to Althea to Arthur Ashe, coming through Leslie Allen, Zena Garrison, Venus and Serena, right up to Karin Chao, 2022, going back to really her introduction to this back, I guess, in like 2017. So we see the throughput of our community, which not just the Harlem community, but just the Black tennis community, making such a support system for this to happen. And it just reminds us our own responsibility of maintaining this legacy,
Well, I just have to jump in and just quickly say those names that you mentioned were incredible. They have on their website, the International Tennis Hall of Fame, Breaking the Barriers exhibit, which they've had up now for almost the better part of a year, which is the incredible legacy and chronology of Black contribution to the game. Created a committee to find Black and brown candidates deserving of being inducted. So it's just a whole lot of CYA. And unfortunately, and look, I appreciate Katrina Adams so much, because she has done so much. And we've been on opposite sides at times. I mean, I've had to try to say, hold to account, because she has those positions of prestige and opportunity, and she has taken those gratefully. And she's now with the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So unfortunately, with that comes some baggage, because say Dr. Eden is not in the hall. There is a lengthy list of people who deserve to be there, and the folks of more recent times who deserve recognition. It's unfortunate. I'm glad the USTA is trying to do something to elevate the legacy of HBCUs. I don't always agree with exactly the tactics, but I'm glad they're putting that in the conversation. It's important. And now to just give some substance, and which they're doing more of this year, thankfully, and just talking about that great legacy of contribution. Because without the HBCUs, I should say, the ATAs would have had no place to play. I mean, we talked about Green Book before in terms of places that Blacks could actually participate and perform, or even stay in a hotel or rest or what have you. But the HBCUs provided that foundation that the ATA in 1925, the ATA could start playing at these various venues, and their in terms of coaches and players is outstanding and should be well known. And we're losing those programs. I just got to say that's another program, obviously HBCU, and the need to fund those scholarships. But we're losing men's programs in particular. Title IX is protecting Corinne and some of the female players, but unfortunately, we're losing men's programs really quickly, and a lot of them. So that's another topic that needs to be discussed in our community and in the broader community, for sure.
I also want to just take a moment and just do a kind of a screen share. I want to make sure that people also know about the Whirlwind Reading Challenge website, which in case people want to participate with that. Let's see if I can do it here. My tech skills are a little rusty.
Get rid of Curtis, we'll be fine.
I don't need to do that. He seems to do that on his own. So this is the Whirlwind Reading Challenge website, and that is the URL. And I suggest people go to that website and read a little bit more. And there's an opportunity for people to donate if they want to support the turning of his home into a museum. Corinne, would you like to say a couple of words about this?
I'd like to see her on the screen first. What the heck is going on here?
All right, listen.
Okay, but the Whirlwind Reading Challenge I started in August of 2019. I obviously heard about Dr. Johnson from the Rex Miller documentary, and I decided that I could do a reading challenge, and that's the way I'd be able to raise money to help fund the renovation of his house into a museum for him. So nice. So my goal was I would read 1,000 pages and raise $1,000. But with the help of the Black tennis community and everyone in the tennis community, like at all, I've been able to I read 2,000 pages, and I've been able to raise over $4,300, which is crazy.
Congrats! Yes.
And I'm so happy that so many other people care about Dr. Johnson that much and his legacy, and are able to fund his renovation of his home. So I think that's crazy, insane.
Corinne, go with your bad self. Yes, indeed.
Well, it's so critical, and I have to say this only because I got to know Lange very well, and the unfortunate thing is, and it's not exclusive for the Black community at all, of course, but everybody sees things as a competition. Sadly, me trying to do something for Althea, in my opinion, was raising all boats, because I couldn't talk about Althea without talking about Dr. Johnson or Dr. Eaton or the ATA or HBCUs or AKAs. I mean, the list is endless. And then talking about the future, the bottom line is, from Lucy Diggs Slow, and for those who don't know, she was the first female champion of the ATA in 1917, is a Howard graduate, was the first dean, a female dean in Howard's history, and is a founding member of AKAs of the Alpha.
Oh, wow.
So, the connecting dots between Lucy Diggs Slow to Althea Gibson to Serena Williams is perfectly connected. And the sad part is that for most folks, they have no idea who those two other women are. Serena, of course, is a worldwide icon, and her and her sister have done just immeasurable things to move progress forward, civilly, socially, and in all ways. And the saddest part of all of it is they boycotted an American tournament for 15 years
Mhm.
because of racial indignities.
Oh, is that Indian Wells?
That was Indian Wells 2001, which is
Wow.
considered the 5th major. And sadly, and in their home state of California, of all places.
Wow.
And sadly, the entitled, unfortunately, parties that were in attendance felt it was fair to call them out their name, to say the N-word to their father. There's never been a public apology. These girls boycotted that tournament. When you boycott it, you pay a fine not to be there. It's a mandatory place of play. So they had to pay a fine, not win tournaments, not win, prize money, not get those matches on their record. What would their record be after 15 years? Easily, they would have won 4 or 5 of those championships.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, if not more. So, I mean, what they sacrificed, and sadly, I mean, I'll just say, people in the media in a lot of ways saw that as a personal family fight as opposed to a Black community fight, which is unfortunate. But like I said, there is this stigma of competition. If you're not lobbying for one person, you're taking away from another. And it's just it's something that we just have to continue to grow and talk about why all of these things matter and they uplift each other. And hopefully we'll get there. And I'll just say, obviously, you guys know I'm pushing, at least with a lot of people supporting, of course, for an Althea Gibson Day, because she should be celebrated. As she was called the Jackie Robinson of tennis for good reason. She didn't like that moniker, but she accepted it, loved Jackie. But if she's the Jackie Robinson of tennis, then we should do at least what Major League Baseball has been doing for the last 20 years in celebrating and commemorating that breaking of the color barrier. And I think people are gravitating to that notion like, yeah, why haven't we done that already? And I just got to tell you quickly, unfortunately, one of the high executives, I won't name him because that's not fair, but when I told him what I thought about, trying to promote this Althea Gibson Day, he looked around kind of sheepishly and said, "Didn't we just erect a statue to her?" As if that was some
enough. That's right.
Haven't we done enough for you people? You are coming back again asking for more.
It's not.
You got a street sign in Harlem, for God's sake.
It wasn't Angela Bassett in the new Wakanda Forever.
Never enough.
Never. No, but it's the sad part is when you come from that bubble of entitlement, you don't understand, or you refuse to recognize the really disrespect that you heap by saying something as innocent as, "I thought we did that already," and that's the problem of really having people in the room. If you don't have people in the production room, if you don't have people in these rooms to bring these things to the attention of folks who are just not connected, then sadly we keep treading water. So, we're just going to keep chopping.
And Dr. Keith, I have to say, from your perch in Central Harlem there, and of course being the chair of the Landmarks Committee, certainly with the changing demographic, have you felt some pushback from the new inhabitants of the community for these, let's say, street renamings, or even looking at some of these historic structures and say, you know what? No development here. Let's see if we can go back and preserve the legacy of that particular structure that's iconic to my community. Dr. Keith.
Well, I'll tell you, the effort to preserve Harlem's legacy in all of its wonderful ways is an ongoing one, and it's one that's difficult because the pressures are not just from newcomers who may be indifferent to Harlem's past or they may not particularly care for it because they see Harlem as part of Manhattan. Certainly developers see Harlem as part of Manhattan. And so that is the stance that they take. And the effort to continue to preserve Harlem's legacy as a mecca for the Africana experience is something that is ongoing, and something that the local community boards and Block associations and other stakeholders work hard to make sure is not swept away through development and through indifference. And I just want to also say the consequence of that entitlement for people in our communities is that they end up not knowing the legacies of their forefathers. And so walking down these streets and not knowing all of the amazing things that happened with the people that lived here that affected the entire world is something that we're trying to correct and trying to hold up to the rest of the world as not just an example of Harlem's significance, but an example of how Harlem's people affected the rest of the world and world affairs and world events. Althea Gibson is an example. And I think due to Glenn's foresight, having the dedication on her birthday, her 95th birthday, is really perhaps a example of when a good Althea Day might take place. The same day that Althea Gibson Way was dedicated. So that's something to look forward to, hopefully. And
for sure.
We won it during the main draw, though. We unfortunately, her birthday usually falls during Fan Week, which was last week, and sadly, it's a great time. And quite honestly, back in the day when they played the U.S. Nationals, which she won, it was on her birthday that she actually broke the color barrier in 1950. But those dates have moved as commercially necessary now. So we kind of start at the end of August, the beginning of September for the main draw. And we need the folks at the main draw to understand, the folks who are spending $4,000 and $5,000 a ticket, who could be joining Karin Chau's, reading program and donating series. I mean, when I had friends fly in from California, I just have to say, and they spent so much money. I mean, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a ticket so they could sit front row to cheer on Serena Williams. Man, if I just had a tenth of what was spent just by Black people who came to see Serena play, airfare, hotel, tickets, man, we could fund a lot of screenings. We could do so much good work, and not to belittle their support and their fandom, but it's just, we've just got to find a way to tap into these folks. And that's the other part of this, the celebrity part, the part that taps into the folks who have the most and who have the ability to enjoy these things. We've got to give them more reasons to be courageous and invest behind our legacy. And the critical part of what Keith was saying is that the denial of the knowledge is one thing. We'll never close the wealth gap when we keep dismissing. And that's the reason they do it, is to keep us from. There's 3 survivors of the Tulsa Massacre in 1921, all over 100 years old. They're still trying to deny them reparations. I mean, these people witnessed their community decimated, people killed, stores, businesses, homes destroyed. That generation will never be able to pass on anything. And the craziest part is the mayor, his family literally lives off the back of 1,000 slaves that they own. And he's got the nerve to say, well, the present generation didn't enslave anybody. Why should we be bothered with dealing with this current trauma? No, I mean, it is all the repercussive events that have taken place. And, talking about gentrification in Harlem. I mean, there is so many things that have affected our community. We know Seneca Village and York Hill and Central Park, flooded, drowned, all of that. There's a bunch of communities around the country. We keep losing these things because, unfortunately, we're kind of at the whim of the entitled. So we've got to stand up, we've got to talk about it, and we've got to reclaim these things. And I'm a reparations guy, I tell you. All right, fine. Anyway, sorry, Bob.
Well, I also
that's
think
all right.
It all kind of connects in that, I like to use this term e-racism, which is basically taking any history that includes Black excellence somehow manages to not get beyond the next generation. And this is why we have to fight to get it back. And that's why one of the reasons why we're very impressed with Corinne, not only for her efforts in sports, but for her efforts to understand the history and her commitment to reading and preserving that legacy is really, really so important. So we really appreciate your efforts in that regard. Corinne, I also want you to talk a little bit, because you stand also on the shoulder of your parents, who were also tennis players. So let's have a couple of words about them and how that affected your desire to play tennis.
Okay. So my parents actually met on a tennis court, which is funny. So obviously tennis is in the family. So at a young age, my parents taught me all about tennis. My mom taught me all about the greats like Arthur Ashe and Althea Gibson. So I learned all that from a young age. So I've always known that they were so important to me in my tennis career per se. Well, that's crazy. Yeah, because I learned, obviously, since tennis is like in the family, they met on a tennis court. I started playing when I was probably 5 years old. So I've been playing for almost 12 years or something. So it's always just been, tennis has been such a huge part of my life. And none of it would have been possible for my mom or my dad if it weren't for Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe. So.
Well said.
Well said.
Well, can I just pop in one quick second? And I don't mean to dominate anything. I just wanted to say that's the reason I try to do these things. We had a great event up in Charleston at the Charleston Open, and that's South Carolina's Althea's home in terms of where she was born. But it's always about Corinne, and I have to mention Amanda James, who was the 9-year-old who was just unbelievable in her own testimony of the importance that she learned of Althea, and the fact that she said when she's on the court and she's the only Black girl there, that she has to remember folks like Althea who sacrificed and made such an important leap in terms of facing all of these indignities and these slights just to break through. And that's, I'm so grateful that Corinne's on this program, and that I've met her mom and her dad, and those stories of young people who get it is just not as commonplace as I would hope. Understanding how valuable this history is, that's a job that we have. My generation, maybe we dropped the ball, and putting a value on this history. If you've dealt with Scholastic or anybody else who feeds our schools, Black history information is free, but you have to ask for it. There's no compulsory Black history, and of course we say Black history because they don't include it as American history, which is what it is. But that is something that we've got to put a value. When I do screenings, some people are not happy that we charge for it, but it's like, this is really important information and there is a value to it. And for Black folks, we don't often put a value, or if we do, folks try to dismiss it. So it's so critical that young people like Corinne, like Amanda James, get it and understand how critical it is that this legacy continues to live on, not just verbally, but in real tangible things like history books, museums, dedications like this. So thank you, Corinne, and thank you to your parents, who are amazing people.
Yeah, I just want to also say that just my generation in general, we always tend to focus on the here and now. If we really want to look back on the past, they kind of have to make an effort to do so, which is bad because if you don't know the past, it's bound to repeat. That's what my mom always tells me. So you have to learn about the past if you really need to appreciate where you are now, because without the past you would not be here.
Well, it's important to be able to hold folks accountable, and unless you know that history and can give the facts, then they can dismiss it. And that's the problem with media in general.
Yeah.
In terms of the folks that Fox News that we know create their own narrative and dismiss the facts. They don't care about misinformation because it feeds their story. We've got to be able to counter that. We've got to be able to say, no, hold it. As Jeannie Ashe says at the end of the documentary, so many people think Arthur Ashe broke the color barrier, thought he was the first to do. No, Althea came first, which I don't mind putting out there now because I've trademarked it. So
yeah, I had a mixed doubles tournament for my reading challenge, and this woman was like, "Oh, I've never heard of Althea Gibson. I know who Arthur Ashe is, but I do not know who that is." And I was like, "Okay, let's work to have people like not be like that and know her as well." So,
but that's the power of film, though. Hidden figures. Who knew about Dr. Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan and all these amazing women? I mean, thank God for oh my God, the woman who wrote it, whose name is escaping me right now, but just an amazing story. Pharrell, obviously, getting involved with production, but that's why documentaries and film are so important. Unfortunately, people don't read as much as they used to, and you still need to put things in books. We need to put facts and information, but these movies, these films, these documentaries make such an impact on a broader scale. Really, really critical. And Althea and Dr. Johnson knew each other, and that's another amazing story, but I won't bore you with that today.
Curtis, we're not hearing you. We see your lips moving, but don't hear a word.
Are you saying he's a puppet? What are you saying?
This is like one of those kung fu movies. You killed my teacher.
I want revenge.
Prepare to die.
He's funny if he didn't have headphones on, but it's hilarious that he has headphones on. It's all good.
He's got a great smile.
All right. So,
yes.
So Curtis has been out of the country, and so while we were gone, we sent the gnomes in to mess up all his technology. So.
Well, let me just say this quickly. I'm still going to lobby for that additional block between Malcolm X and Fifth Avenue, because that's what we were trying to do, but the forces of the board would not allow that. And I won't put Keith on the spot as to why, but anyway, but we're gonna keep pushing for that. And Dr. Patricia Bath, who's another Harlem genius, who I think the AKAs are very interested in seeing her get her due on her home block. So the legend continues, and we're gonna keep fighting for all the ones that matter, and hopefully keep inspiring young people like Corinne.
And of course, we would be remiss if we did not close out by giving Serena, Venus Williams, Richard, and Oracene Williams all their due for the tremendous impact that they've had. And Serena deserves all the accolades that she's getting, and Venus deserves the accolades that she should be getting now. And we also are thankful for the King Richard movie, because I think that, he is at least starting to get the accolades that he should be getting. And Glenn, we appreciate you're fighting every battle. You're fighting for Althea, King Richard.
Pray for me. Pray. Well, I got to just say, Corinne is a perfect example of young people that, man, Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, these girls they're so substantive. And they're frightening the mainstream, because they are speaking just with such authenticity. No corporate speak, no PR. These girls are talking truth to power. For Naomi Osaka to be at Indian Wells and hear jeers from the crowd and say, that brought me right back to Venus and Serena being molested by the crowd in 2001. I mean, to put those words out there by another player of color, one who was inspired. Their father taught his daughters because of Venus and Serena and Richard Williams and Oracene Price. Make sure you say Oracene Price, not Williams. She might be a little upset with that, but anyway. But on a real note,
Mm-hmm.
Coco, and I mean Sloan, and all of these this legacy is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia Parks and Haley Baptiste and Whitney Osigwe and Taylor Townsend. I mean, the list really is endless. And Francis Tiafa holding it up on the men's side, and Chris Eubanks. I mean, these young men, Ben Shelton, 19 years old, whose father played. I mean, there's so much there. And we haven't even talked about Malavia Washington and his family, what Mr. Washington did just prior to the Williams family coming on the scene. But we just have some great dynasties and great people who've just done so much to uplift and have been sanctioned by the gatekeepers, by the USTA, by other folks. So we've got to do a lot to uplift their names because it's important, and they shouldn't feel like they've been dismissed. So, yeah.
So we've got to start wrapping up. So I'm going to ask Dr. Taylor to give us some final words, and then we're going to give the last word to Corinne because she's got to carry the torch on while we sit back in our easy chairs. So Keith,
easy chair for you. I'll be right there.
Okay. All right.
You know, as Glenn was talking, there's so many things running through my head about the importance of Harlem and why people should not just celebrate Harlem and all the people and the things that they've done. They should come and visit. And the Althea Gibson dedication, the now Althea Gibson Way, is one example of many different examples of greatness that exists on these Harlem streets in the fields of business and medicine, like Dr. Bath, and science and entertainment, of course, from the Harlem Renaissance, the great artists and musicians and writers, and everything in between, the Harlem Hellfighters, and just so many different things that are exciting and relevant to this country's history that makes Harlem a very worthy place to visit and celebrate. And I'm glad that we now have one more piece of that in terms of Althea Gibson's dedication. And she was first, and now we have a permanent reminder for anyone who comes. Thank you.
All right. So Corinne, a few last words.
Mm-hmm. Again, it was insane and incredible to be able to speak at Althea Gibson. Dedication to her being named after the street she grew up on. It just shows how important it is for me and everyone to know what happened in the past and how it led us to where we are today. And if it weren't for so many people, we wouldn't be here. So we have to remember that Althea came first.
There it is. So we want to thank you all for participating. Karin Chao, we're looking forward to seeing what you bring into the world, whether it be on the court or off. We know that you've got a bright future in front of you because you've got your history behind you. Thank you, Glenn Gilliam. We, as your friends, we roast you and rib you, but we're going to take time today to acknowledge you because we know you've put a lot of time and effort into fighting for this legacy, and we appreciate it. Curtis Archer, do you have any last words? Evidently not. Okay.
How appropriate.
All right. So
Bob, thank you. And thank you, and Curtis, for doing these
thank
shows.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
This is what this platform is here for.
No.
Soul Lounge Prime Time on WHCR 90.3 FM every Monday night at 7 p.m. and live streaming on YouTube and Facebook at 8 p.m. Happy Labor Day, everybody. And come on back and see us. We've got something interesting for you next week. We can't even tell you. It's a surprise. We don't even know what it is. So thanks, everybody.